Hi everyone. We're Team Blue Crew 6417, an FTC team based in Rockville, Maryland. This video is going to be about how to create a team plan for an FTC team. Because while the Blue Crew has been around since 2012, we recognize that the guidance on team plans is not super detailed, and that a lot of teams that are starting out or teams that maybe have been around for a while but want to be more well-rounded, it's kind of hard to figure out what exactly you're supposed to do for the team plan. So hopefully this video helps with that. We're going to be covering kind of the 5 W's of the team plan in this video. With the most helpful really being what and how. So if you're already sort of familiar with a team plan, then those are the sections to focus on. So what is a team plan? This is what the FTC Engineering Notebook Guide outlines as a team plan. Hopefully you've taken a look at that. You can pause it to just read it for yourself. But in our own terms, an FTC team plan is your team's non-engineering direction and goals for the season. So what non-engineering purpose is your team serving in your community? So your team can be composed of multiple things. We typically have a team plan consisting of a business plan, sustainability plan, and a strategic plan. So a business plan is about internal affairs mostly. How are you managing your team this year? How are you organizing your team? Whereas sustainability is about sustaining your team from season to season. So how are you planning on sustaining your team to survive even as members graduate out? And then your strategic plan is pretty much your plan on how you are going to achieve those goals. And in each of these, your key elements are: what are your goals? Why did you pick those as your goals? What's your plan to achieve those goals? How did you end up executing that plan? And then evaluating the success of your plan and considering what to do for the next season. So just looking at the elements of each of these, a business plan, remember, is how you're organizing and managing your team. So that's your team management. How is your team organized? You have a hierarchy, leadership, sub-teams, who's responsible for doing what. It also details your outreach and community service, fundraising, and finances. Your sustainability plan is about, remember, sustaining your team from season to season. So how are you planning on recruiting new sponsors, mentors, and members? How are you planning on training newer members or less experienced members for positions on the team and leadership roles, so that your graduating members don't leave a massive hole in the team? How are you planning on fundraising for your future events? And what kind of reputation and legacy are you hoping to leave on your community? And then the strategic plan: how are you achieving these goals in your business and sustainability plan? So completing a SWOT analysis at the beginning of the year to evaluate yourselves, setting those goals and rationales, and then planning out what steps you need to take and the timeline of completing those steps. So, outreach. What is outreach to a first team? Well, the goal of outreach is to spread the spirit of first, passion for STEM, really give back to your community. So a lot of some activities that a lot of teams have done, demonstrating their robot, which typically happens later in the season, doing STEM exhibitions, so just like physics demonstrations, chemistry demonstrations, things like that. STEM workshops, so actually teaching kids rather than just demonstrating, and holding teaching sessions and things like that. And then also interacting with FLL teams, First Lego League teams, which is the middle school bracket of first competitions. And then most teams tend to do that through schools and libraries, local organizations, or over the internet. So if you're a new team, you can look to those areas to figure out how to get involved in outreach. Fundraising, obviously you need money to pay for the parts, to pay for event registration. So fundraising is a component of your income besides sponsorship. So possible things you can do to fundraise: recruit sponsors, have donation box at outreach activities, or actually host fundraising events like bake sales and car washes. Most teams typically don't need to do those because First really prefers that you learn how to secure a sponsor, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Then you need a budget. So when you create your budget for this season, if you're a new team, things you need to consider is your registration expenses and then what you expect to have to spend on robot parts and outreach. Those are your main areas. If you're a returning team, look at your past season and then try to figure out what's changed in your income, what hasn't changed, and what's changed in your expenses and hasn't changed when you're trying to figure out your funds for the season. And then we have mentor and sponsorship recruitment. Pretty straightforward. For mentors, you're trying to find professionals who have experience in either STEM or business or public speaking even, who can help you grow as a team and learn new skills. And then sponsors, you're looking for a source of money. So these are the possible ways you can go about securing those. New member recruitment, you need to make sure you have enough team members to keep your team going from year to year. This is really important because you don't want your team to graduate and then the entire thing to fall apart. So some pretty standard methods of recruitment for your outreach events in public schools is really big. You can also look at FLL teams. Kids who are entering high school can't compete in FLL anymore, and a lot turn to FTC. You can hold an open house for your team, use the internet, etc., things like that. And then you have member and leadership training. So this is part of sustainability. How are you making sure not only will your team survive to the next year with enough members, but also not suddenly fail because no one knows what they're doing because the experienced members have all graduated. So training usually happens hands-on activities, getting involved, doing training exercises and leadership exercises, kind of having pseudo mentorships with experienced and non-experienced members, those sorts of things. And really anything else you can think of that falls in the realm of non-engineering aspects to keep your team going will count as part of your team plan. So who needs to get involved? Well, ideally your entire team, although it is recommended, or at least our team recommends, that you have someone who's sort of in charge or a group that's in charge and focusing, who can keep you guys all on track with your plan and make sure that someone is organizing and coordinating these activities, because it's very easy to get distracted by the robot. That's usually the funnest part of the whole thing. When you really do need to be working on your business and sustainability plan throughout the season, it shouldn't be something you do just to check off a box for notebook. So at the beginning of the season, really planning out your plan, so the strategic plan, and then during the season, executing that plan, revising it, updating it, considering what you can do for the next season, those sorts of things. And then where, obviously within your team is where the planning is going to happen, but always remember that your outreach sponsors, mentors can come from anywhere. Your community, the first community, even the global community. So if you're struggling to find maybe outreach opportunities, remember you have the internet. You can always expand. If you're struggling to find mentors, you can turn to other first teams. there are always avenues of finding ways to keep expanding on your plan. Why do you need a team plan? It is a requirement for Notebook, and you do need it for a lot of awards, especially if you're aiming for Inspire. You do need to show that you're a well-rounded team. You can't just come in with an engineering section. But ideally, you actually want to do a team plan. It really does help create a positive impact on your community. Outreach is really, really important for that. It also just helps you as individuals create to develop skills in areas that, the engineering part of FTC isn't really giving you. And then in that preparation for the real world with finances, with marketing, management, all those things. Okay, so then how are you going to go about doing this? How are you going to get outreach? Or how are you going to develop this plan? So at the beginning of the season, you need to outline your plan. During the season is when you execute it. Then the end of the season is when you evaluate, and you can also keep doing activities for the next year. So beginning of the season, Blue Goo highly recommends you do a SWOT analysis. This is a very, very vaguely worded SWOT analysis, so when you conduct yours, it should be a lot more detailed. But you want to look at the strengths of your team, the weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You want to capitalize on your strengths. You want to develop a plan that capitalizes on your strengths, tries to address your weaknesses, seizes the opportunities you have, and either delays or directly combats threats or avoids them altogether, if it's possible to do so. So considering when you've looked at yourself, at your team introspectively, your strengths and weaknesses, then you're going to set out and try to devise goals for your team. These goals should fall under the categories of business, so that's outreach and fundraising, and team management, so how you're going to keep your team organized. And then you should also develop goals for sustainability, so recruiting mentors, sponsors, and new members, and then training inexperienced members to be leaders and develop engineering skills. And then you can also develop engineering goals. We highly recommend that too. And try to make your goals really as specific as possible. So instead of just do outreach, try to set a number or a range if you would prefer. It's a little more flexible. So as you can see, this one is 3 outreach events at local middle schools in late season to showcase robot. And then if you were explaining the rationale for this goal, I would say, displaying your robot at a middle school, even letting kids drive it, is really great competition practice. It helps you see if your design is robust and simple enough and resilient enough to withstand middle schoolers. And then it's really exciting for kids to see a robot, and it's like a concrete way of showing them what STEM can be like. And it's really effective in getting kids interested in FLL, which then positively impacts your team because that's a source of new FTC members. So lots of a great rationale for choosing this goal. You're going to want to pick a goal and then explain why you chose that goal. You're also going to want to figure out your team organization at the beginning of the season. Usually it's your mentors and sponsors, then team captains or the heads of your sub-teams if you decide to break into sub-teams, maybe for engineering and then coding and then like business, something like that. And then you want to make sure you outline who is doing what. This is really, really important. You can't get halfway through the season and wonder, oh wait, who was supposed to be in charge of outreach? So you want to outline this. This is also really good to have for Notebook, for judges to get to know your team better. Then you're going to need to plan how you will achieve your goals. So this is kind of the crux of your strategic plan. What steps are you planning on taking? What do you need to do to plan for the activity? What do you need to do to execute the activity? And then how are you going to evaluate your success at the activity you chose? So at the 3 STEM displays of the robot for middle schoolers example, what do you need to do to prepare for that activity? Well, you need to contact middle schools that are hosting STEM nights or some other similar activity. You need to make sure your robot is working by that date. You need to get volunteers who can go. When you execute it, you need people to be engaged. You need your volunteers to show up. You need batteries. You need to make sure your phones are charged, that sort of thing. And then when you evaluate it, how are you going to figure out if you were successful? Maybe you have a sign-up sheet for kids who are interested in FLL, and you try to figure out how many kids were inspired to try out FLL because of you. That sort of thing. And you're going to create a timeline for these steps of the plan. It's more important that you detail your internal activities and worry less about the external things. So, the middle school STEM night, you don't know when those are going to be hosted, but you do want to say, okay, here's when we're going to plan for it. Here's how we're going to plan for it. That sort of thing you can outline. So at the beginning of the season, this is kind of the outline that it will look like. And then as you update, this is sort of the planned out timeline. And this would be sort of what actually ended up happening. So what tasks overlap, and this is what you update while the season is going on. And then you're going to create your budget. I think I broke this down earlier, but consider expenses and income. If you're a new team, make sure you look at your registration expenses. Consider the key areas: outreach expenses, robot part expenses, and then registration. And when you're creating your budget, it's really helpful to look at your past years to figure out what you're probably going to be spending for this year. And then you're going to begin executing the preparations for the activities. So start planning, start contacting people, that sort of thing. During your season, you're going to be executing your plan, the steps of your strategic plan, which is, the outreach and fundraising for business, and then the recruitment and training for sustainability, or really anything else that you can think of to achieve those 2 objectives. You can obviously adjust your plan, adjust your timeline, introduce a new plan. This should be super flexible. If new opportunities come up, absolutely seize them. Make sure you document them. So as you prepare for them, write everything down. After you do them, evaluate your progress as soon as possible. Take pictures while you're doing the activity, that sort of thing. And then the end of the season, before your competition or off season, evaluate your plan. Try to consider what you can do for the next season. And then you can keep, obviously, doing these activities. Outreach and community service. There's a lot of outreach opportunities during the summer, even though this is technically off season. So that's a really great option. And then if you need help, these plans are outlined in the first engineering notebook guide, which is somewhat helpful. It's a little bit vague. So what Bluecrew really liked looking at is the award descriptors, especially if you look at the ones, I think it's motivate and connect. Explain what you need to do to get the award. So that's really helpful. And then probably the most helpful, a bunch of amazing FTC teams have uploaded their past notebooks online on websites. So if you just Google FTC business plan or FTC team plan, FTC engineering notebook, you'll get a lot of examples of what people have actually submitted to judges before, in case this guide isn't specific enough for you. So yeah, that pretty much concludes this presentation. Good luck on your team plan. Yeah, best of luck.